So I'm going to inspire people who maybe have no pension fund at all. They may be 30, they may be 40, they may be 50, who are worried about their retirement. And I'm going to explain how they are going to be able to retire with just putting away £100 a month. Now, of course, the more you put in your pension, the better. But when we've done recent videos about how much you should have in your pension at given ages, there's been lots of comments from people who have said things like gloating really about how much they have, and people obviously panicking. And what I want to do is those people who are worried, I want to point out there are decisions they can make that can make a huge difference about the kind of retirement they're going to have. So what I've done is I've played around with some calculators. There's a whole range of pension calculators out there, and I'm going to show you how you can do it. I'll put links to 2 of them in the notes of this particular show, and you can go recreate what I've been talking about or use examples that are personal to you. Now, in the examples I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be talking about somebody who's 30, somebody who's 40, and somebody who's 50 that has no money in their pension and they're about to start. I'm going to use a couple of assumptions as well. So first of all, the maximum tax-free cash you can take from a pension, as we know, is £268,275. I'm going to assume that you are going to be paying 1.5% in terms of charges on any pension that you have. So we're talking about defined contributions here. I'm going to assume as well a growth rate of 5%, which is in line with the medium risk level that the FCA stipulate. I'm also going to assume inflation at 2%. Again, this is in line with the recommendations of the FCA. And that enables me to bring all of the numbers I'm going to talk about into today's numbers. So by that, I'm taking into account inflation. So just think about when your nan tells you about her house, which is probably worth 400 grand today, and she bought it for 10 grand back when she was younger. It's to bring the numbers into today's value. So there's no point talking about a pension of £30,000 if it's £30,000 in 30 years, because you won't be able to buy anything with it. The numbers I'm going to be quoting are the £30,000 in today's numbers. When we project it into the future, it'll actually be a lot bigger than that. But it's to give you context so you can understand what retirement would look like if it happened today. Now, I'm going to also assume contribution increases at a rate of inflation of 3%. Again, that's standard. And we're going to assume annuity rates that are based upon a single life and annuity rates as they are today. So that's how you can work out the rough income you can get from a certain pension pot. I'm also going to assume a retirement age of 68, because most people listening to this video will have a state retirement age of 68. So that's when you get your state pension. And I'll assume you'll get your defined contribution pension then. You'll access it then. You'll wait until that point. And as I've mentioned already, I'm going to assume you've got no pension fund. The other thing I'm going to assume is that you're getting a salary which is the median in the UK right now, according to the Office of National Statistics, and that number is 37,500. So that's the median, slightly different to the average, but it's broadly the same thing. Now, the first example I'm going to do is someone aged 30, and I'm going to assume they've got no pension pot at all, and they're not going to get a state pension. I'm going to assume the government's going to scrap it before you get there. Now, I'm also assuming that you're going to have a salary of 37,500, and you're going to want to generate that from your retirement pot. So how much would you have to put in today's money so it would actually work out to be the equivalent of 37,500 when you got to age 68? Now, actually, you'd have to put in £1,050 a month, which is a third of your salary, to build a pot big enough to generate an equivalent of 37,500 a year. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is you are only going to need to generate about 2/3 of the 37,500, what you're earning now, when you get to retirement, because you will unlikely have a mortgage. So that means that your pension pot only has to generate £25,000 a year. So to do that, you would, as somebody who's aged 30, have to start putting in £750 a month, which roughly equals 24% of your salary. That's still a very big number. Don't worry. The next thing I'm going to say to you is I'm going to assume that you're not going to take any tax-free cash when you get to your retirement age. You're going to have actually paid off your mortgage. You're going to make sure you don't need to rely on your tax-free cash. So everybody is generally entitled to 25% of their pension pot they can take tax-free. You're going to use all of your pension pot to generate an income. That means if you do that, then the amount you need to be putting in a month today is £575 a month, which is 18% of your salary. Now, as I mentioned, that amount is going to go up each year by inflation, but so is your wage. So you don't have to worry about that when I'm using these examples. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to ensure your pension isn't overcharging you. So you're going to make sure your pension total charges is not going to be 1.5%, but you're going to drop it to 0.5%. Now, this is roughly what Nest charges. So that is the scheme that most people will probably be in if they are employed. Now, if you do that, or if you've got a pension with anyone else, you go and make sure you're in low-cost funds and you're not overpaying on platform charges, then you can drop the monthly contributions to £475 a month. And in doing so, you will still hit that £25,000 a year income that you're going to have to generate from your pension pot. So it means your pension pot is going to be bigger because you're actually paying less to the pension providers. Now, you are young. I'm going to say you've probably got the ability to take more risk. You're not going to be able to access your pension pot for 38 years. You're only 30. I'm assuming you're going to take it when you hit state retirement age at 68. So rather than invest in a default fund or a fund that's only going to potentially give you a return of 5%, try and take a bit more risk. I'm not saying this is for everybody. It's down to your personal risk profile. But if you took a bit more risk, and let's say you got 8% a year, which is one of the levels that the FCA do allow to be used in projections, then that brings down the amount a month you need to put into £160 a month. So don't languish in default funds, and you could take a bit more risk. It will mean your fund will grow more quickly through the power of compounding, and so you have to put in less. Now, the next thing is make sure if you are employed that you auto-enroll. There is free money on the table here. So if you pay 5% of your qualifying earnings into your pension, your employer has to pay 3%. Now, qualifying earnings are between £6,240 a year and £50,270 a year. So there are certain rules about who qualifies for auto-enrollment. Put a link in the notes of the video so you can read that in more detail. But if you did all of those things that I've said and you auto-enrolled, it does actually mean that you could only have to pay £130.25 into the pension each month, and your employer will pay £78.15, and you will achieve that £25,000 a year that you're trying to get as a retirement income when you get to age 68. But of course, those numbers I've been talking about are gross numbers. So if you claim tax relief as a basic rate taxpayer, that is actually only costing you £104.20 in reality. And of course, in my example, you're a basic rate taxpayer, but people must remember if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you can claim, for example, 40% tax relief. Now, the rules, just to reiterate or remind people, to achieve what I've said, you should make sure that you auto-enroll. You need to check the pension benefits that you get if you are going for a new job, for example, and make sure that they are as good as they can be. You need to check your scheme charges. You want to talk to your employer if they are expensive and say, hey, can't we do something about that and drive them down? And don't invest in default funds. Make sure you engage with your pension, and also don't rely on taking your tax-free cash when you get to retirement. So you need to make sure, which most people will be on these days, make sure you're on a repayment mortgage. Now, what about the 40-year-old that has no pension pot, is starting to pay in, wants the equivalent of £37,500 retirement income at the point that they get to their state retirement age at age 68. Now, if they want to do that, they're going to have to put in £1,620 a month, assuming they've not done any of the things I've explained that the 30-year-old was going to do. Right, that is a big number. But if instead they did all the things that I told the 30-year-old to do, and they are paying £130.25, that's gross a month, that's 5% employee contributions, and they're getting the employer contributions of £78.15, they would be a shortfall on the amount of income that they need. But I'd argue they're probably going to get their state pension. So if we do add the state pension into this particular example, and at the moment it's £11,976, and as I've said, I'm working back into today's numbers. So if you combine that with the income they would generate from the fund they're going to grow from their contributions that they're now putting in, they would end up with an annual income of £28,376 a year generated from the age of 68. Now, of course, the income is taxable, so they have to bear that in mind. But you can see they have got to the stage where they are generating an income that they desire. Now, what about this person who's age 50? Now, technically their state retirement age is likely to be 67, but I'm going to use 68 because it just makes it nice and easy. They've got no pension. Then if they do all of the things that I've suggested, but not the boost in the growth rate from 5% to 8%, because they've probably got less time to be able to take the risk. So I'm going to leave that as it is. Then they obviously aren't going to be generating anywhere near the type of pension that they need if they're only getting those contributions from their employer of £78.15 a month, and they're only putting in a gross amount of £130 a month. What would happen is they'd end up generating from their pension pot at age 68 £3,910. But if you went to your employer and said, look, I know you only pay my contributions on the qualifying earnings, can you do it on all my earnings? Because they could. If they did that, and you, for example, paid your 5%, then that starts to boost the numbers up. And if you also ask them, for example, to say, can you match my pension contributions? That boosts the numbers even further. And everybody, not just the 50-year-olds, should go and ask their employers to match their pension contributions, because that is free money if they want to do it. You could forego a pay rise 1 year and say, can I have the pension contributions boosted? And if you do that, the amount of income that can be generated from your pension at age 68 is just under £5,000 a year. Now, let's assume that your partner, if you're married, does the same thing. That's £10,000 income you've now got from age 68. And if you add in the state pension of nearly £12,000 each, assuming you're both going to get it, then we're looking at something like £34,000 a year income that can be generated. Yes, you're going to be relying on getting the state pension, but suddenly the world looks a lot better because of the decisions that you've made now. So just because you haven't got a pension pot, that doesn't mean don't start. It means you just need to engage with it. But also, because you are going to rely on your state pension, you need to check your national insurance record, make sure there's no gaps. Now, I'm not giving you obviously a solution to be able to retire and have the best retirement, but I'm giving you some hope. So if you do all the things that I've mentioned, then hopefully people are going to feel a little bit better about life, but they're also going to engage with their pension and start on that journey if they haven't already, rather than bury their head in the sand. So as you can see, there's been a lot of work that's gone into this video. So if you find it useful, then do hit that like button, but also subscribe to the channel.